Well, good evening, everybody. How are you doing tonight? I hope nobody ate so much pizza that they fall asleep in the middle of the meeting. Maybe we should eat afterwards next time. There are two handouts tonight. Okay, there's a printed one of the slides I'm going through, and then there's one with some detail of our reserve study. Anybody need either one of those? Just raise your hand, we'll get you one. Okay, we good? All right. Windows decided to do an update. It was all set and ready to go, but it's doing an update, so it'll be just a second before we're ready to get the slide show back up and going. So I don't really know any good crowd-pleasing games and stuff like that to entertain everybody for a minute, but however, the slides that we're going to show on the screen are the same that you have on your handout. Okay, so if you have the handout, you should be good.
Can I ask a question while we're waiting?
You sure can.
Okay. I'm looking at this line that says asphalt.
Right? We will get to it.
Well, I see 385.
Yes, you do.
I've been here 25 years. I remember what the last road job was.
Right. This is from...
A lot more than 385.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons we're having this conversation tonight. So this is from our 2017 reserve study. So I'm showing you what is in our current reserve study, and we'll talk about what is okay with the current reserve study and what is not.
As I remember, it was $750,000.
Yeah, the last quote we have, a 2-inch overlay runs about $300,000 a mile. And, grinding up and doing a 3-inch overlay is about $400,000 a mile. That was a quote from 2 years ago, so it's a little bit more than that. But you've already identified the elephant in the living room or the dining room, as the case may be. That's exactly it.
Major item.
That is a major item that we need to address. That is the elephant in the living room. So we will be talking tonight about an approach to handle that in a long-term plan while still maintaining and taking care of the other stuff we have to take care of.
All night on the dining room chair.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's up, but the clicker's not right now. So is it
Okay, it's all right, John. We've got the handouts. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you guys, everybody, for coming. I've got the better mic tonight, so I'm going to wander around as I'm talking. So, but welcome. I hope it doesn't rain before everybody leaves. How was that pizza, by the way? Yeah, round of applause. Yeah. All right. What Dave asked me to check what kinds were the best. Pepperoni. So pepperoni, was that the best? Canadian bacon pineapple. All right. Let's do it a different way. Did anybody have one they didn't like? Right? Okay. Didn't like the tomato basil? Well, don't do that. So Dave was here. Dave was here Sunday, perfecting the cooking times, on these pies. They take anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes to cook, and he did all the cooking tonight for the entire group. Okay, and he had some help in the kitchen, but he did it. Yeah. Okay. So as we get started, we're gonna drill in tonight to follow up on where we ended last town hall, where we ended up talking about reserves. Okay, we're gonna follow up on that and dig into our reserve study, what that means for the park, what reserve balances look like, how that impacts us in taking care of all the items we need to get taken care of moving forward, and how we're going to figure out a plan to move ahead. Okay. Before we start talking about the reserve pieces, though, I wanted to take just a minute to revisit this idea we introduced at the first town hall called smart spending. Okay? Because smart spending underpins everything that we're doing here at the association. Okay, most of us that work here, actually are homeowners too. All right, so what happens with dues matters to us, just like it matters to all the homeowners and everybody else that's here in this community. So the idea behind smart spending is that we want to get the most value from our existing budget. So that's the first thing we do, right? Are we spending smart? Are we doing it efficiently and effectively? So an example of this would be we recently changed the work schedule for our security patrols. We shifted from 5 8-hour days to 4 10-hour days. And the reason we did that is because when we looked at the calls and the service calls that came in, we found, not surprisingly, there were more service calls during the day and in the early evenings. So it makes more sense to have resources available during the time when we have more calls come in. It allows us to provide better service. Okay, so without changing the budget, just by shifting hours, we're able to overlap schedules and provide better service to the community. So that would be an example of smart spending and the kind of thing we're looking for. All right. Another example would be spending a little bit more for better efficiency. All right. An example of this, we had one of the kitchen fridges went out in July last year. Okay. And so Dave had identified a replacement, and the replacement would have fit exactly where the fridge was that we already had. Okay. It would have been quick and easy, but it wasn't really the best item for the solution. So when I talked to Dave, he said, hey, if we spent $800 more, we could reconfigure the kitchen to make the workspace more productive. All right, we created more space. People didn't have to bend down as far. We removed a cabinet that was at one end, which increased the airflow in the kitchen, which increased the visibility, which actually just made a much better, more productive and pleasant work environment. So again, example, spend a little bit more money to get a good return on it. Another quick example of that is OSS tools. So typically the OSS would borrow equipment from the water company. Okay, and we have a particular truck that we would use to excavate pipes and do excavations. Of course, challenges occurred with scheduling when we did that, and we'd have to coordinate the scheduling. And it's called the vac truck, and we only have one of those. They're a very expensive item, so it made sense to only have one of those. But when I worked with Greg, we talked about what other options would we have, and so what we did is we bought a pressure washer and a pump for a couple $1,000s, not tens of $1,000s like the vac truck, because then they didn't need, because they could use that actually for almost everything that they were using the vac truck for. In fact, they can use it for things they weren't using the vac truck for. They can use it to carve through asphalt. They can use it to excavate fittings and find connections. So it was a couple $1,000s, but it saved a lot of time, and it made the crew more efficient, and it improved having to coordinate the same equipment with the water company. All right. Another example of smart spending is doing things right the first time. All right. Sometimes we're pinched for money, so we spend the minimum amount that we have to get the immediate problem taken care of, even though we don't really solve the problem. Right. And we've all done that at home, right? I know I've done it. I've been in that position. You've only got so much money. You've got to do what you can do to get by. However, if we're keep doing the same thing over and over, it's a little more prudent to set aside a little bit, set aside a little bit, set aside a little bit until we can solve the problem completely. So example of that was a roof on the pool house. So we kept repairing it every year. It cost us about $800 to $1,000 every year. Kept leaking again in the same place. Till eventually, and this happened, even before I was here, till eventually we said, you know what, this is silly. Let's just fix it and take care of it. Even if it costs us 3 times as much this year, it's going to save us money over the long run. All right, make sense? Okay. So all of that I call smart spending. And the last aspect of smart spending that I want to talk about tonight is about prioritizing items that affect the most residents. It's a little bit like the security piece we were talking about, but it's looking specifically at the items that the most residents use and figuring out how can we deliver more value for those. So what if we had a way, to expand the pool hours and double the amount of time the pool was open without increasing our pool budget? right? Would that be a good thing to look at? Okay, so there is actually a way to do that. It means changing the way that we've done some things before. We'll talk about this more in detail when we actually go to the budget town hall next month. But basically, we do not have to staff with lifeguards. Most HOAs do not staff with lifeguards. That is our single biggest expenditure in operating the pool. Okay? It also means we cannot have the pool open unless we have lifeguards there. Okay? So, there's no requirement that we have to do that. In fact, it actually reduces our risk of lawsuits by not having lifeguards. And everybody's kind of might be scratching your head. How could that be? Right? Well, the reason is when we put lifeguards out at the pool, we're essentially making an affirmative obligation or a promise to keep people safe. Okay, so that increases our liability in the event that somebody gets injured. All right? So insurance doesn't change. Costs of operating the pool don't change. But we could expand the pool hours if we put up, it's a matter of putting up about a half a dozen signs and getting automatically opening gates, which we actually could do with the labor budget that's already in this year's budget for the pool. Okay? So that's the kind of thing we're looking at. That's the kind of thing we're saying. And if we did that, we could open the pool, for example, from 6 a.m. until 11 p.m. at night. Right? We could potentially keep the hot tub open all year long. Okay? And the neat thing is, by saving those dollars, if we save the amount of money in 1 year, which would be about $40,000, because I still would recommend that we staff with a pool attendant during noon to 5 o'clock when school is out, right? Because that way we keep the snack bar open. Someone's there monitoring the pool during its busiest times. And we still have someone to do water aerobics. I'd get lynched if we didn't do water aerobics, I know. But even keeping that in mind, that we keep paying for those things, we would still save about $40,000 a year. Okay? Well, guess what? It costs about $20,000, roughly, to install heat pumps that would heat the pool. Okay? Okay, now heat pumps don't operate all year. They basically work like reverse air conditioners. But based on our elevation and temperatures, we could most likely keep the pool open from mid-March to mid-November. Right? And the cost to operate that, based again on our air temperatures and the size of the pool and the amount of BTUs that you need to do that, is estimated at about $20,000 a year. So even after we installed heaters and paid for 1 year's worth of electricity, right, we still would be able to save additional money every year over what our current budget is. Right? So there is a proposal that has been made before, and Doug Dorsey is sitting here. I'm sure he would be happy to talk to you about it, as well as the rest of the group right by him, who came in and talked to me earlier this year, I think in September, I think is when we chatted, about a possibility of covering the pool. Okay? And there are a couple options. They range between about $90,000 and $150,000, depending on how you do that, which is a lot of money, right? But if we were to save up the same money that's in our existing budget over a number of years, right, we would be able to cover the pool without increasing the pool budget, right, and keep it open all year long, right? And we'll talk about the particular details of that more in the next meeting, but the reason I'm bring that up is it's the philosophy that we're applying to all of the dollars that come into the association, okay? No, we're talking about a tent type cover. We can talk about that one more next time, Beata, on the specifics. But the sides actually open up and get removed during the summer. There are a whole bunch of variations, and honestly, that one's a far out thing. It's nothing that's on the short-term plan. There's nothing that I'm going to talk about tonight. I'm just bringing it up as an example of the kind of thing we can do by planning ahead and setting aside a little bit of money every year to address those longer-term projects we want to accomplish. Okay, yeah.
You said changing it to 410s. So
Yeah.
is there still security 24 hours?
We don't staff 24/7, but we get like 3 calls between 2 and 5 a.m. over the course of a month. Yeah. But we can talk about this more later. I am happy to address that and talk about it with you in detail. But basically, you know, our security acts as a liaison. If there's anything that's an emergency or that's dangerous, the immediate thing is we call the sheriff, and we have to involve them as law enforcement, because we're not law enforcement, right? We respond to community complaints. We respond to issues. But if there's something that has to be done that's an emergency, we assist with that. But anyway, I'd be happy to talk to you about that more. Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally understand. And then, yeah, which has mostly been solved. So we had a major problem with that a year ago, but we still do rotations, and we don't announce what our specific hours are or what days we have coverage or don't have coverage. So we're still doing coverage. We're just trying to provide more people to be available when we get the most calls. Okay? And if the community wants to do 24/7 with multiple, then we can do that. It's just as a matter of increasing the budget to pay for it. So what I'm talking about is what's the best value we can do with the dollars we have already. Make sense? Yes. Okay. All right. Well, let's move on then. And actually dig into the reserves. So keeping in mind that this is the same philosophy we're going to apply to our reserves and to our long-term planning that we're already applying to our existing operating budget. Okay? So first of all, I just wanted to clarify what reserves are, because sometimes, you know, people think like for myself, I don't have a specific reserve fund, you know, for replacing my roof. I don't have a specific reserve fund for paying my insurance. Okay? I have money set aside that's extra money that's available in case there's something that unexpected happens, you know, outside my regular budget, but I'm not planning ahead to replace the roof on my house. So sometimes people think of reserves like that. It's just an extra stash of money to use if we need, or if something fun comes up that we want to do, or something comes up that we have to take care of. That actually is not what reserves are as far as it relates to an HOA. That would actually be called a contingency, okay, something that's unexpected. For reserves, they're funds that are specifically set aside by the homeowners association to pay for the replacement or repair of community property, usually on a defined schedule. Okay? And they're intended to prevent the need for special assessments. The reason for this is because based on the repair schedule, some years you may, you know, have $1 million because everything comes up due at once that you got to repair. And some years you may not have anything. If you only repair things when they break, then you're going to constantly be surprised and everything's going to all start to break at once like it has been this year. But that's what reserves are. They're actually specifically set aside. They're a financial planning tool, okay, to help us organize and order the cash flow for the organization so that we can handle all of the maintenance and replacement that we need to without needing to do special assessments. All right? They are not set aside for general expenditures or new purchases. It's not just an extra pot of money. Okay? So a reserve study, right, is a budget planning tool which identifies the current status of the reserve fund and a stable and equitable funding plan to offset the anticipated future major common area expenditures. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but I think you guys get that, right? The reserve study consists of 2 parts, okay, the physical analysis and the financial analysis. Okay, both parts are important, okay, because the reserve study is a long-term guide based over 30 years that helps us predict what our cash flow and expenses are going to be based on the anticipated life expectancy, okay, of the amenities and of the infrastructure and of the equipment that we have, right? It's just an estimate, right? Some things last longer than you anticipate. Some things don't last as long. So it's important that you are constantly reevaluating. You know, every year you go out and you look at your major components to determine how much life do they have left. Can I push it out, in which case there's no reason to replace something that doesn't need to be replaced. That's just wasting money. Or do I need to accelerate it? Do I need to bring it earlier forward because it's breaking down and it's not working correctly? So you have to do that physical analysis to make sure your reserve study adequately reflects the remaining life of the equipment and infrastructure that you have. Does that make sense? Okay. And then you do a financial analysis of all those items. You take a list, and we'll look at one in just a second, where you say, what would be the current cost to replace this item? Okay, today, if I had to replace it today, what would it cost today to replace it? And then you say, in essence, I don't have to replace this for 5 years. Okay, so in 5 years, what will it cost to replace it? We'll make some assumptions about inflation, etc. But then in 5 years, okay, I'm probably going to, if it was $100,000 to replace this year, in 5 years, I'm probably going to need $110,000 to replace it. Okay, and then you say, it's 5 years away, so I should have 1/5 of what I need to replace it in 5 years set aside in the reserve fund to take care of that. All right, that concept makes sense? Okay, so that's how the reserve is supposed to work. Okay, and it is really a critical tool for effectively managing the park long term. Okay, so I put here, just for a comparison, okay, the last two slides we talked about last time was just kind of show you what other associations are doing to handle this, how much money they put aside, how much money they spend. Because you got to put money into reserves and you got to spend money out of reserves. The idea is to try to balance that out so you always have enough to take care of what your major expenses are. All right. So YLP, and I've taken out OSS. The reason OSS is not included in this is all the other associations pay their OSS fees through their water bill. So it's not an apples to apples comparison in terms of our overall operations. Okay, so we pay $1,009, not counting OSS or aerobics inspection. We put $175,000 last year into reserves. Okay, that represented 8% of what we received. Okay, so it's about $78 per lot, or about $6.50 per lot per month. Okay, if you look across at the other associations, okay, the minimum amount as a percent of reserves that they put in is 17% of their dues. Okay? Keep in mind their dues are also higher than ours. Right? Almost double, in fact, for that portion. So they are putting away, so if you double that, it's 34%. They are putting away 4 times as much money as we are. The one that puts the smallest amount away, right? It's putting 4 times as much money as we are on a percentage basis to take care of the future repair and replacement of their amenities. Okay? I mean, that right there, guys, tells you the story why our roads aren't fixed. Okay? That tells you the story of why we have deferred maintenance on the clubhouse. It tells you the story, of why we have these other things that need to be addressed. Okay? And I'm not going to, we are where we are. All right? So.
What are we comparing this with? River Guard, the Blood?
No. We're comparing it to 3 other associations
Up here?
that are very similar to ours. They're founded in the same year. I'd be happy to give you a copy of the presentation we did last time with the slides that go through that and how we selected them and why. There are also the videos posted on our website. But we had selected them to be like us. Okay, so they're associations that were founded in the same year. They have similar amenities. They're in similar geographic locations. We're all about 2.5 hours apart, ranging from Tehachapi, up a couple hours north of here. But we're all very similar. Okay, similar price of homes with the exception of one of them that is a little pricier. Okay, and similar demographics. Okay, so we're not just saying, here's somebody else that does reserves. We're saying here's somebody else like us. Because there aren't that many associations like us. We talked about that a little bit last time too. Fewer than 8% of all associations are large associations, right? So there are only a handful. Actually, it's 3%. But there are only about 7,000 or 8,000 associations across the country that qualify as large associations. and that's $1 million budget and 1,000 acres. All right? Well, if you look at a bell curve, we're way out on the edge of that 7,000, 8,000 other large associations. So we're a large association, as are these others that we did comparisons to. Okay? At the bottom of the page, I show you what our reserve balance was at the beginning of this year. We had $422,493 in our reserve fund at the beginning of this year. Okay? Remember, we made a contribution this year of $175,000. That's slightly different than what our budget said because we reclassified some capital expenditures to call them reserves because they really should come out of reserve funds. So there's no funny business with the numbers. It just is, they should have come out of reserves in the first place. So we're just we put the money in reserves and we're taking the money out of reserves. Make sense? Okay. So we're going to spend $92,000 roughly out of reserves this year, giving us a projected reserve balance of $505,000, which sounds like a heck of a lot of money, right? I'd love to have that $505,000 in my bank account. I'm not hinting at anything, by the way. But it's not, but when you look at it, given the scope of our entire community, $500,000 is not very much money. It's 10% of our 1 year operating budget. 10%. Okay? If you look at the other associations, you know, first of all, they're putting in a lot more money. Secondly, they're spending a lot more money. Well, spending money is a good thing because it's maintaining and fixing all of the things that get old. Right? But if we don't spend any money, we're not going to fix anything. But every one of them, you know, with the exception of Pine Mountain Lake, who, if you see, is actually spending $3.7 million this year on improvements. $3.7 million this year. Okay? That's why their reserve balance goes down. Remember, your reserve balance goes up and down. Usually they don't spend that much. Right? But they just got hit with a big year. They're replacing their restaurant. They're doing a bunch of road work. They're doing a bunch of stuff. But the other ones, you know, like the Pines, $1.9 million. Bear Valley Springs is on the lower end because they didn't have a big year, $514,000. But they're all going to end up with still millions of dollars in their reserves. Even Pine Mountain Lake, next year when they do their budget, that number is going to get refreshed. And they'll have a couple $1 million in their reserves again, just like that. Okay? So I just wanted to kind of frame for you guys what we're dealing with. The page with the graph shows a reserve comparison. It's a graphical representation of that same page. It just kind of shows the picture. No pun intended, actually. Okay. So I'm going to pause there for a second. Does anybody have any questions about what we covered so far? Yes, ma'am.
I do. You were talking about how you want to make the pool more accessible to everyone and longer throughout the year. And you were saying 20 grand. I think that would only be for setting it up like that. But what's it going to cost you annually?
That actually is that's the operation. That's the annual operations cost. That's the annual operations cost.
I find that impossible.
I can show you the numbers. It's just the cost of the electricity or the propane or electricity to operate the heaters. So, but we'll run that. That would be really a budget question. I just wanted to use that as an example of how we were spending. So, okay. Any other questions, comments about what we covered so far? Okay. Yes, sir.
You're finding past administrations, did they ever come in and borrow from reserves to do other work? That's why our reserves are so low, really?
Yeah, Pat, I don't really want to go into why the reserves are so low. I understand, but I don't know all the details of why the reserves are so low. I know some of the stories, and I know some of the reasons. I know for example that Bob needed the porte cochere, right, was falling down. The wood was rotted, and it was dangerous. And if we didn't fix it, it was going to seriously hurt someone. So we didn't have it budgeted, but he needed to use $40,000 from the board approved to replace that. So those kind of things happen, and that just is an example. So, yeah. The biggest reason that that the reserves are where they are is we haven't historically put enough money into reserves. We've traded keeping dues low in the short term versus planning for the long term. And people do that. I mean, that's a, that's a trade. I just, Yes, ma'am. We did. Everybody hit that. That doesn't. That's a complicated question. But yes, we did. Yeah. Yeah. And that's another reason why having a good reserve balance is helpful, right? Because in the event that there are things beyond your control, like economy changes or natural disasters, you have the money to survive without going bankrupt. Just like, it's recommended you keep 6 months personal savings in case there's some emergency. You can't go to work. And if you're dependent on the money coming in from work or dependent on the money coming in from dues and you don't get it because, 20% of the houses get foreclosed on, what are you going to do? Right? Okay. Yeah, right, exactly. That's fine. That's fine. I'll take that one, Pat. Okay, so the next page, we're going to take a look at the reserve study that was delivered to us in 2017. Okay? So that's what's here. What you're looking at, the first column is the year, fiscal year, which was 2017, 2018. We're required by law to do a reserve study every 3 years. Okay? It's required by Davis Sterling because as homeowners, you have the right to see and understand how the planning is going and what you can anticipate the future expenses are going to be to maintain the community. All right? So next column is beginning balance, and then it shows member contributions. Okay, member contributions was set at $72,000 that year because that's what we had put in our budget when the reserve study was done. We're obviously not going to make much interest on that. They had recommended from our reserve study, based on the life expectancy of all of our infrastructure, was to spend $346,000. Okay, that's what the reserve study recommended that we do. Okay. Now, you don't have to follow the reserve study. Okay, you don't have to. You should have an explanation why we're not following the reserve study, which can be that we don't have the money to handle this right now. There's something else that's a higher priority. We have longer life expectancy of these items, so we're going to be able to push out repairs for a longer time. So, it's not a step-by-step do exactly what the reserve study says, but it's a rough guideline of the amount of money, that you kind of need to spend on those old items that need repair. Okay? So, for the next year, and this was the current fiscal year, the recommendation was that we fund $445,000 into the reserves. Okay? We budgeted for this year to put $175,000 into reserves. Okay? Yes?
Educate me. What's the difference between ending balance and fully funded ending balance?
Okay, the fully funded ending balance is the number that you would need to safely have in your reserve fund to adequately meet all of the expected future expenses. We're short. Yes. Yes. And that's based on a number of assumptions too. Okay. Generally, you don't fund your reserves 100%, right? Because you're not going to have to replace everything all at once. Remember, this is a 30-year plan. Okay. So you don't have to have all the money in the bank to be 100% funded. How much you need to be funded depends on how soon those things are coming up that you need to pay for. Right? Make sense? Okay. So they recommended that we spend in this fiscal year $455,000. Okay? So this year we spent about $92,000. Okay? I'll show you, we'll go to another page in a minute that shows a different summary of that. So you can just look down that line of member contributions of what, based on our current reserve study, how much money do we need to put in as homeowners every year to fund the replacement of the items that are coming up to be replaced. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so I think you can see, based on that analysis, we're behind. Right? So let's talk about that a little bit more. Let's go to the next page. This provides us a summary by category of what the replacement costs of the items are based on category. Okay? So again, the elephant is going to float right to the top. Okay? Asphalt. Okay, I'm going to tell you guys that asphalt at $346,000 is not going to get us paved roads. The assumption that is made in this reserve study, all right, is based on the company that did the analysis, but they did the analysis based on information that we provided to them. And we provided to them that we weren't planning to do an overlay on all the roads. Okay? Now, I don't know when that was initially provided. It could have been multiple reserve studies before, but because that's not in there, they're not estimating the cost for doing that, and it's not in the balance of reserves that we need to have to replace the roads. Okay? So, wish it were different, but that's what it is. Part of the reason for this, remember the definition of reserve study where the two components are? You got to come do a physical inspection and then do the financial analysis. That's why it's important to come do the physical inspection so you can update your assumptions, right? And again, no criticism of anybody. I mean, I know a lot of the board members, and I know a lot of the communities and even prior managers, and we're dealing with different times and different situations. So it doesn't do us any good to kind of point backwards. This is where we are. What are we going to do about it? And I'll give you guys a plan in a couple minutes when we get there. But I want to dig into this reserve study a little bit more because unfortunately, there are some other things about this reserve study that make it a bad planning tool. Okay? I'm going to dig into detail here on the clubhouse piece. If you look at the clubhouse, the line says $405,000, right? That's the estimate by the reserve analyst of what it would cost today to replace all of the items that need to be replaced at the clubhouse over the next 30 years. Okay? So far, we've assigned reserves of $21,000 in preparation for that. Okay? And the life expectancy of the items that are in that portion of the study are 0 to 26 years. Okay? The remaining life. The useful life is estimated at 2 to 43 years. Okay? Now, I want to dig in with you guys in a little bit more detail about a problem that exists with this reserve analysis. Okay? So, first of all, missing items. So, next page, John, thanks. Okay, obviously one we already talked about, road repair and maintenance. It's not in there. Okay? It's not in there. And the asphalt maintenance, I'll also be honest with you guys, I probably shouldn't say that because I'm by default honest with you guys anyway, even when I don't say that. But just redoing the parking lot out here would eat up the $350,000. Okay?
Can I talk about the last time we did the roads?
I will stay as late as anybody wants to talk and answer questions, but I do have some things to get through on the numbers and get to a plan.
Because it's the major item, and
Right.
we have a guideline as to what was done before. It
Right.
affects all the numbers we talked about. It's the elephant in the room.
Yeah, it is the elephant in the room, but it's we'll get talking about that a little bit more in a little bit. The next thing that's not in this report, guys, ADA updates. Okay, ADA updates are a required responsibility of the community. Americans with Disabilities Act was passed in 2010. It requires us to make public spaces accessible to people with disabilities. Now, there's some people that believe that there's a grandfather clause. So if we don't change anything, we don't have to comply with the ADA law. That's not true. In 1991, which the first ADA law was passed, that was the case. Okay? But the requirement now is if it is reasonable, we are required to make that accommodation. And what's the definition of reasonable? A lot of it has to do with financial capability, and it has to do with the physical layout of your building. So for example, we don't have to install an elevator to the second floor. Not only is it economically not feasible, we don't let the public access the second floor. Okay? ADA is not related to employees, it's just related to public. Okay? However, remember we have an operating budget of $5 million. So spending $10 or $20 or $50,000 on ADA compliance would not be considered unreasonable. That would be considered well within our capability. Okay? I don't want to give anybody any ideas, but there is a risk associated with ADA compliance. There's some teeth in this law. Okay? That there's a $4,000 statutory fine associated with violations for ADA. Okay? For every violation. Not just one. Not just, oh, go fix it now. No. You pay the fine, and you can be slapped with additional fines and fees, okay, based on the judge's determination of whether you have made a good faith effort to address the ADA issues. Okay? At this point, guys, got to tell you, we would not have passed that qualification for making a good faith effort. So, not only is there a risk there, but, you know, I mean, it is, you know, particularly given the community we're in, I think it is a great thing to have our clubhouse and our other amenities accessible with, you know, with bathrooms that are appropriate and ramps, and make it accessible because we, you know, let's face it, we got an aging population that isn't able to actively participate in the clubhouse activities easily, right? Okay, another thing that's missing on our reserve study: multiple vehicles, trucks, dump trucks, security. Security, in fact, isn't even on the list. So nothing of security is even on the reserve list right now. Heron Appliances. There are 2 on our reserve list. We have 14. Okay? So I hate to be making the situation worse. I know it was bad enough when we started talking about this. Looking at how far behind we were underfunded already. But it is worse because the reserve study doesn't bring into account everything that we have. All right? Also, the reserve study has some bad cost estimates in it. HVAC to replace for this facility is estimated in our reserve study at $12,500. Okay, I had a quote done in October. Okay, the quote at that point was $45,000. All right? We've had 2 ACs fail here in the last 2 years. This one above this room, which we paid several $1,000s to have fixed 2 years ago. It was difficult to repair because it's 25 years old, and we had to find special parts. We had the one in the lounge go out in January. Okay? We elected at that time, this is one of the purposes of reserve funds, we elected at that time to fix the problem. We replaced it with current modern split systems that are more efficient than what we had before, and now that problem is solved and it's taken care of. But just that cost $10,000, just for that room. Okay? Clubhouse windows. Clubhouse windows are on our reserve study. We have 52 windows. 46 on the lower floor, 6 on the upper floor. Estimated cost to replace the windows in our reserve study is $2,300. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, if we move on to the next page, you replace them for energy efficiency purposes, and the other reason is that over time the glass just degrades and it eventually becomes brittle and it starts to break. So, but that's an item that you'll see when I get later. I don't have that because of the return on investment. I don't even have that on my current list. We'll push that one out. Right. So, all right. So let's look at this page. I'm making a couple notes. This is the detail of what a reserve report looks like. Okay, it shows you each item, right? It shows you how much life is left for that item. Okay, what the general useful life for that item is. Okay, what the current cost to replace it is, and whether you have funded it. Okay, if we go down this list, there are a couple things that jump out. Well, first of all, we talked about the HVACs. It's not $12,460, it's closer to $50,000. So we have 5 of them at this building. The appliances, okay, the appliances, we have 14, not 2 in the kitchen. To replace all the appliances in the kitchen, you're looking at $200,000 to $250,000 just for that. Now again, not all at once, right? You plan for this over time. The challenge is most of these things haven't been replaced for a very long period of time. So we're kind of on this cliff, right, of coming up against the edge when things just start breaking on us, which is what's happening right now. The air conditioner, had a refrigerator fail in July. We had another freezer fail a month ago. We had another freezer fail last week. So we're at that point where we can't keep pushing this down the road. And the other thing that happens is if you wait till it fails, we need that fixed right away or the restaurant's not operating, which means we're not able to plan effectively to do something more efficient, to rearrange it, to get the best price. You're really not even in a place to price shop. You're going to call the vendor that has the part you need that fits right where it is so you can get it going. So that is not smart spending. We don't want to do it that way. Okay? Okay, we'll talk about budget piece next time. Okay? And you can also look at our restaurant compared to the other restaurants in the last presentation I gave. We actually are incredibly efficient for running an HOA restaurant. And our revenues have gone up approximately $300,000 per year since Dave Pohl has been here. And I'm not trying to push off, avoid talking about it. I'm happy to talk about it. I just don't want to get distracted from the reserve piece, okay? So, all right, other items on there. Office computer budget. You know, they estimate $6,000 to replace all the computers. No. We spent $6,000 that was in our budget this year. We replaced about half of them. Okay? Not our servers, not our other routers, not our firewalls, not our wireless access points. Okay? Painting. Painting is $14,000 is the estimate. I had a painter come out last week to give us an estimate of painting downstairs. It's $20,000 to paint downstairs. Okay? Interior. Okay? So bottom line is our reserve study is missing several pieces. All right? So I want everybody to take that other handout that I gave you. I'm going to get mine too. Okay, this is what we are going to do with this one. Everybody, rip it up. Rip it up. This reserve study is not an effective tool for figuring out how we're going to move forward. Okay? Doesn't give us the right numbers. It doesn't give us the right time frames. Okay? Well, that's not smart spending because we're going to have to pay more for janitorial service for cleanup. But, yeah. At any rate, guys, I wish there were a different story that I was telling you tonight. Okay, I wish there was, and I do have some good news. I do have a plan. Okay, but it is a viable question. Is it hopeless? No, it's not hopeless. The answer to it is we got to start doing something and move in a positive direction. Okay, with a multi-year plan of how we're going to address this. We got to this place over a long time. We are not going to fix it all at once. Okay? Last point I'm going to make on the current reserve study, it just shows you that we are underfunding and underspending. Okay, that is why the roads aren't fixed. That is why the maintenance isn't done. That's why, whatever you look at. I heard someone posted on Facebook, it looks like Motel 6. And, there are places where it does. And you know what? If as a community we want to have that, that is okay. That's okay. It really is. I would say that, we don't want to be a Motel 6. I would say we also don't want to be a Ritz-Carlton. Maybe a Holiday, right? I was going to say Holiday Inn, a Ramada, maybe a Hilton. Something that's nice, but not pretentious. Right? Something that's comfortable, right? But not cheap. Right? So that's my philosophy, but this is something we decide as a community. Right? Okay, so if you look at this one real quick, our reserve contribution over the last 2 years, $517,000 was the recommended on the old reserve study that we just tore up because it didn't have everything on it. The actual contribution, $247,000. Okay, so we underfunded in the last 2 years by $270,000. Reserve spending recommended over the last 2 years was $801,000. Actual spending about $104,000. So we underspent by about $700,000 over the last 2 years. Okay? Now, this is the one time I'm going to look back, all right? Because it is a way of actually looking forward. I'm going to ask what if. Okay, what if? What if 20 years ago, all right, we would have started paying $2 more per month? Just $2 more per month per household. Okay? Would have been pretty painless. We're talking $25 a year, right? Would anybody have noticed that? Even 20 years ago, would you have noticed $2 a month? No, we didn't have you then. That turns out to be, over 20 years, that would have been $40. That means our dues would be $40 higher today than they are. But it would have been painless to get there. We wouldn't have even noticed it. We wouldn't be complaining about any more than we already did about dues going up, right? Our annual budget would be $1.083 million more than it currently is. Our operating budget would be $1 million more than what it is. Okay? And the real kicker, we would have accumulated over $11.3 million in reserve funding, which we would have spent to do the maintenance, to do the thing. But this is why, okay, this is why we're here, because, we made different choices at the time. And the reason I'm bringing this up is to say we got to change this. All right? We've got to address the deficiencies, and it sucks. I hope nobody minds that word, but it sucks. All right? And we need to anticipate going forward that dues have to go up a little bit each year. They have to keep up with inflation. They have to keep up with the planning for the future replacement, even of the items we replace brand new. If we're going to replace that air conditioner, we know that air conditioner is only going to last about 12 to 15 years. So we need to set aside a little bit of money every year so that when it's time to do it again, we don't have to have a big increase and go get a lot of money from everybody, that it just falls in a smooth flow of what we're already doing. Does that make sense? Okay. So, what do we do? Yeah.
I'm looking at that last PowerPoint, and it says that we'd have all this money reserves and such, but it just seems like, when people start saving money or our reserves go up, what happens is people tend to just spend it. Oh, let's do a roof for the pool. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's do all these things. And pretty soon we're in the same spot, and our dues are just up here. And I think that, I don't know. I think that a lot of people here, and I totally respect. It is. It's been a long time. But my concern is that we're just going to start spending ourselves out of, wanting to do this and doing that.
Sure.
And that's my biggest thing.
Sure.
Because it affects our resale, our values,
Sure.
and everything. But at the same time,
Sure, higher dues affect resale value too. No question.
Replacing anything and
No.
everything looks
no, I'm not
It-
saying
right.
maintenance. I'm saying
It's-
that when we start
it's a
getting our
balance.
reserves,
Yeah.
where are we that we can start? When we have a a say in spending. Hey, we,
Yeah.
you know what, where the community has a say
Yeah.
in where it's spent for additional purchases.
Yeah, here is the thing. Reserves, okay, are not free-for-all money. They are to be spent for designated, specific replacement items. And we have not always done that, okay? But legally, that's what reserves are for. Okay, in fact, as the GM, I cannot authorize any reserve spending whatsoever. The board has to approve reserve spending. Now, I'll make recommendations based on what I think needs to be done and based on what I think is smart spending, but the board has to make those, and the board has to report to you what they spent it on.
Is there some way we could do something where, if people are considering major expenditures, that we have people feel like they have more of a say as some sort of a poll, like maybe even if it be online or, on our website or something, we get some feedback on all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I'm going to actually pass that one off to the board and let them address that. But I'm going to table it for tonight. Okay, but I think it's a great question, and that's a good question of how do we want to operate as a community, right? It's a very good idea. Yeah.
I would just recommend that whoever has questions like that come to the budget meeting.
Yeah.
That's where the decisions are made.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of busy families, and if you
Yeah.
go online and just so, these are, here's some costs, here's some possibilities, what are you for, I think that
Yeah.
would help a lot of the younger families and such too.
Yeah, and I think those are good ideas, and we actually have the platform now with our new website to enable that kind of feedback. And so, I think that's, ultimately the decision for what to do with spending on reserves belongs to the board. Ultimately, it's a board decision. So.
But as board members, we cannot use reserve funds on something that's not a reserve item.
Right.
From a reserve study.
That is a violation of their fiduciary duty.
Call the cops on it. We can't do it. You can't do it. If you talk about places, and I've talked to some of the people that belong to this other association, one's got some family members.
What time is it?
And they are doing things.
7:31.
Again, we cannot take reserve funds and expend them on anything that isn't a reserve item. We have that assurance. It's against the law. You can prosecute us. And we can bring it to the association for an emergency and do something about an emergency. And maybe use, but we gotta get your permission.
So.
That's what Davis Sterling stands for. We can't do it.
All right. All right. Another question?
Yes, but as you mentioned earlier, there are so many things that are not in the reserve study. So when are we gonna have a new reserve
Right.
study with the correct
Yeah.
estimates so that the things like
Yeah.
ADA compliance,
Yeah.
and I know I'm setting you up.
Right. We're going to get right there. So.
That was a proposal from the engineering committee, which I'm the chairman of, to the board at the last board meeting, that we redo our both reserve studies for YLOA and YSPUC immediately this year. So that is been recommended.
Yeah, in this next YLOA budget year, I think is where that is. So we're doing it a year ahead of time, okay, than what's required. In the meantime, okay, and that is actually my first recommendation and the first conclusion from all this. We need a good reserve study off of which to build and base long-term plans. However, I'll also tell you, just a second, yeah, it sucks, right? And I'll also tell you that we don't have to have the reserve study to identify reserve items that need things done. Okay? We can start taking care of those because we know they are on the reserve list already. Okay? In terms of how we fund the reserves and how much we need going forward in a multi-year long-term plan, we're obviously going to need more detail to refine that. But I've got an initial proposal for you. Yeah, Ken?
That study has to be done by a third party.
Yes. Yes.
We don't do it ourselves and just pick and choose.
Right.
And it's expensive.
Yes.
Yeah, it'll probably cost us about $15,000. Yeah. Question?
I was just going to ask if you use a microphone for those that are speaking, or if they can just speak up a little bit.
Oh, okay. Good, I'll repeat the questions when people ask. Yeah. Okay. So I know that's a lot of downer stuff, all right? It probably feels overwhelming. It probably feels depressing. It's part of the reason, guys, why we keep kicking the can down the road. It is a hard problem to solve. It's a hard problem to solve. I mean, I don't want my dues to go up. I mean, unless I know what they're going to get spent on, and it enhances the value of the community, and it provides more value to the people that are here, and it increases the property values, you know what? Then I'm probably okay with it. Because I know that if we don't have roads that work, I know that if we have a clubhouse roof that leaks and it caves in and collapses, and we don't have money to fix it because we don't have money in reserves, that is not going to help the value of me, not going to help me resell my home. Right?
We have a common ground. The board lives here, the staff lives here, we all are part of the community here. We all have a vested interest in it.
Yeah, so Ken's comment was we have a common ground. The board lives here, most of the employees live here. We are all invested in the same thing, okay? Just with the rest of the community. So we may disagree about what to do, when, and how to do it, and etc. That's fair, and the board gets to sort that part out. But first step, get a good reserve study for good long-term planning. Second step, work with a multi-year plan. We can't do a budget 1 year at a time, okay, with what items we're going to do this year, what items we're going to do next year. We need to use a reserve study or a plan, because remember, the board can change the order of what we do on the reserves, okay, because it makes sense to do so, right? But we need to prioritize what needs to be done, because we're way behind, all right? So my recommendation to the community and to the board is we look at the list of things we know about, we prioritize it. We prioritize it on this basis. Number one, look for return on investment. Where will we spend money that then saves money? For example, our air conditioners. Our air conditioners are 25 years old. Okay, they are SEER 8 or SEER 7 or SEER 9, depends on them, in efficiency. The new system we put in is SEER 17.5. For those of you that don't know, each SEER level rating is a 10% increase in efficiency. So the new ones we put in, okay, are 80 to 100% more efficient than the ones we have before. They use half the amount of electricity, guys. Okay? And electricity for air conditioning is the biggest component of your electricity bill. Roughly, it runs about 30%. We don't have specific numbers here, but I'll bet you that it's higher in our association with our ceilings, with the lack of insulation. We spend more than that, but assume it's 30%. Cut that cost in half, the electricity cost, it will save us at least $1,000 a month. So every month that goes by that we don't do this, that's $1,000 a month we give to PG&E instead of putting it back in our reserve fund to take care of something else. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's the first priority. Look for those kinds of things. Okay? Second, reduce our risk. All right? We've been hammered by lawsuits. We've experienced that as a community. Again, it sucks. I wish that weren't the case. And we've paid different directions, and we've got that, hopefully in good control. But it's important to minimize our risk, because then we end up saving ourselves in the long run. So we talked about ADA, for example. So here's what's going to happen with ADA if we don't fix it. Something's going to happen. We're going to get a penalty. We're going to have to pay that penalty, and then we're going to have to fix it. So to me, it makes a lot more sense, fix it first without the penalty, instead of throwing that money away.
Big can of worms.
It's a huge can of worms.
Okay, just what he's saying, a big can of worms, once they look at you, they have a tendency to continue to look at you.
In fact, guys, 80% of ADA complaints filed in California are multiple complaints. People that file more than 10 lawsuits a year. Okay? It's a job. It's a job. Yes, sir.
For example, if something is non-compliant right now, that has to be done.
Okay. We have an accessible bathroom outside, but we do not have accessible space. We don't have a ramp that meets ADA level. Our parking, we have no ADA compliant parking places. The threshold from our front door into this room is too high. Okay, these pieces right here, these transition strips, okay. We've actually had 3 people fall and trip, and that's a different kind of risk, but we've had 3 people fall and trip in the last month. Okay. Yeah. So those are examples, as well as ADA compliant, restrooms. They're very, very specific in what you have to be compliant, but it's mostly about accessibility. For example, we don't have a path around the back of the clubhouse. You got to go there, and then you're on the grass. So we don't have an accessible walking path for wheelchairs. Okay. So, yes, Beata. Okay, Beata, I'm not going to talk about restaurants right now. We can talk about that at budget. Okay? I'm happy to talk about it, just when we're talking about budget. I still got some stuff I got to get through tonight, okay? All right. We have to plan ahead for big items, like roads. That's the biggest one. All right? And then the most important thing about this is we got to get started. The longer we talk about it without doing something, the worse the problem gets. Like it did the last 2 years. You saw because each time the reserve study comes out, it's going to take all the things we didn't do and put them in the stuff that we need to do. All right? And the amount of money we're going to have to pay is going to go up. All right? Because we're going to have to pay it. And, like I said, the current reserves is $700,000 over the last 2 years that they recommended that we spend. And I disagree with their specific recommendations, and I'll tell you why. But if we would have spent that money, think what we could have done with $700,000 to fix the ADA issues, to fix the air conditioners, to fix this roof on this that's been leaking for 10 years. We don't know what's underneath the part that's leaking. I have a picture. I didn't put it in this slide presentation, but I got a picture that I took 2 weeks ago of 3 buckets hanging from the ceiling in the lounge. Okay? We've had leaks upstairs where we have soft spots on the second floor. All right? Now, what do you think is going to happen if somebody steps on that and falls through the floor? All right? You just lost 10 times the cost to fix it. So these are the kind of things I'm talking about when I don't want to be an alarmist. I am not an alarmist. But these are real issues and real risks that we face, and we're going to face them until we fix it. So let's fix it. All right. How do we do that? Well, I have put together an outline that I will present to the board and to the community as an initial budget. Okay? It's a 5-year plan to repair and update our major amenities and build up reserves to replace the roads. Okay? So when I look at this, the biggest return on an investment and the biggest areas of risk, the things we just talked about, they're right here in the clubhouse. That's why I say do the clubhouse first. Second area is the cafe. We've got ADA compliance issues there. We've got risk issues there and a whole bunch of other things. Third, I would suggest that we address the swimming pool. The swimming pool is a lot of deferred maintenance. It needs to be replastered. It needs a new deck. It needs new filters and pumps and a whole bunch of other things. Okay? Year 4, I'd say hit equestrian and rec center. Equestrian, the barn needs a new roof. I mean, we'll go through the details later and we'll find what comes in the reserve study. I don't have details for each of those other places yet, but and then in year 6, we would then have enough money to start road paving. Okay? Doing full road paving, not just repairs and patches, but doing full road paving. And I suggest that we also increase our maintenance budget to extend the life of the existing infrastructure. I think that's an important part of this balance. You heard me talk earlier about why do we keep patching the roof on the pool house instead of just replacing it. Well, sometimes you don't have enough money to replace it. And guys, we don't have enough money right now to replace all the things that need to be replaced. So we have to figure out how to stretch out their lives and spend more money on maintenance and get along until we start catching up and take care of those things. Okay? So what I put together and what I propose as the foundation of this, okay, is spending less actually than what is in our current reserve study. You may look at me and you say, Jonathan, you said the reserve study doesn't have everything in it. How can you even recommend spending less? I said, because we've got to start somewhere, and we have to, and in my mind, you don't just want to put everything into fixing roads because you're not going to have enough money when you do that to start fixing the roads right away. And in the meantime, you still are going to have the risk and the loss in the other places. Right? So there's not just one priority. It's a whole plethora of priorities that we're trying to balance here. And like I said, I believe that the biggest risk for the association is here at the clubhouse and the biggest return on investment. So that's why I would say budget $300,000 for repairs and updates, completing as much of that as possible within the budget. I have outlined and gotten quotes and estimates on a number of items. First would be AC, which we talked about, return on investment. Guys, this one's a no-brainer to me. That should be the very first thing we do. Second, then it links to the roof. You know, kind of give a pig a pancake. We don't want to mess with the roof with replacing ACs and then take them off to fix the roof later when we know the roof also needs to get fixed. So that's why that becomes the top priority. It also is a major issue. If the roof is leaking, right, it is just a matter of time before we have a serious problem. And we it's going to be less of a problem to discover it now than to discover it later, right? ADA bathroom. I know we've tossed around ideas of how to solve this. I've got a plan for you. I've had the measurements. We can take the desk where Ilse has been sitting. That space is enough. You need a 6.5 by 7 foot space to create an ADA compliant bathroom. We have to put up a wall. We have to put up a door. We have to run a little bit of plumbing. We actually even have staff that knows how to do the plumbing. So, yes?
Does the officer have to be ADA as well?
No. Not if it's not publicly accessible. And that's part of the reserve. That's part of the plan to change that. Because once we move this wall, once we put a wall in there, that space is really too small to have even 2 people working in there. So the game plan would be to put windows, almost like a teller window, on the front of those spaces, right? So you could walk up to those. It provides a better waiting area. It's not as crowded. People aren't standing on top of each other like we currently are. It does have a security component too. You might be surprised. Sometimes we have homeowners that are not very happy with our employees, or with me for that matter. I would suggest extending out that place is, like I said, too small, so it would mean we need to take out the room or the wall between my office and that space, and then put another wall in to divide that and to make a larger space. I'll drop the plans and show them to you guys, but looked at it, looked at the numbers. It's doable. We've talked to an electrician about moving the electric box. It's eminently feasible way to solve the ADA issue. Then when you start talking about, you give a pig a pancake kind of thing, when you make some changes and move walls around, you guys have probably seen that carpet. It is well beyond its life, and it's not terribly expensive to replace. The floor in here, remember, we've got some risk from the floor. Per our study, it's supposed to last another 10 years. But I'm going to tell you guys, it's not going to last another 10 years. We got stuff chipping off. It gets slippery when it gets wet. We got potential ADA issues with it. So my recommendation is to replace the floor, while we do that, because it helps mitigate those things we already talked about.
Cheap floor to begin with.
Yeah. And paint, once you move walls and stuff, it's time to paint. It is on our scheduled maintenance to do, our scheduled reserves to do paint. We can add a ramp. Okay, I'm proposing we add a ramp on this side entrance to the front deck. Okay, it needs 18 feet because it has to go, you can only go up 1 inch per foot. There is room there based to have a landing down below and put up an 18-foot ramp and still have the right amount of space to land at the top of the deck. I'm suggesting that we fix our parking issue. We can fix our parking issue by putting in about 2,000 square feet of concrete, tearing out the parking that right now is next to the swimming pool. Okay? ADA parking has to be very compliant. You can only slope 1 inch for every 48 inches, for example. All right? So that's why you use concrete instead of asphalt, because asphalt settles and dips over time. And when you're installing it new, there's not that much difference in cost. Okay? Then you create an accessibility path from that parking area along the grass and the fire lane that comes up to this ramp that we've put here. And then you extend the path around the back of the clubhouse and connect it over there. Now you have solved your ADA issues with a few other small changes. Okay? We have to address the threshold. Men's bathroom. I know probably only half of you have seen the men's bathroom. At least I hope only half of you have seen the men's bathroom. It's disgusting. It really is disgusting. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, they did. You know, downstairs lighting and fixtures. The water heater is scheduled for replacement. It's rusting on the top. Needs to be done. There's an energy efficiency thing with that too. Upstairs fixtures, upstairs carpet, upstairs paint. These are estimates for those. Remember, we've got a risk up there with soft spots on the floor. Not to mention, I think that carpet's 40 years old. We potentially have some mold issues. I mean, there are things that put us at risk. Then I've added a couple other items on here, and the game plan would be get done what you can. Be the smart spending all over again. Get done what you can with that amount of budget that's moving us forward. Is it everything that needs to be done? No, it doesn't fix the deck. It doesn't fix the patio covers. You know, it doesn't fix the parking lot. It does, but I prioritize those on that basis of start with the AC for your return on investment, because it gives you $12,000 a year every year after that we can then spend on other stuff in the future, and then that whole piece leads together. And so that's my recommendation for what we do to that. And I estimate that the cost of that somewhere between about $250,000 and $300,000. Okay? Remember, which is less. It's less than what our current reserve study tells us we should have spent. So, what do we do with the other part? I recommend setting up a dedicated road reserve fund that we start funding, this year. What will happen with that is that it will build up over the next couple of years. Also, OSS is nearly done. We got 2 years left on paying for our trencher. Now, when we're done with that, we got to set aside some money to pay for a new trencher down the road. Right? That's smart, being smart. But we can take $125,000 a year that we're currently spending, combine it with what we're putting into the road reserve budget, combine it with the $80,000 or $100,000 a year that we're spending to zip trench what we already do, and combine it with the $300,000 that I recommend we spend each of the next 5 years on fixing our major amenities to address all these risks and get return on investment. You now have enough money every year to start paving about 1.5 miles of roads, or 2 miles, depending on what level we do and what we need and all the rest of that. Okay, so that's my game plan of how do we get going, how do we get out of here, how do we get to solve that elephant in the living room. I mean, honestly, I wish we could do it right now. We're talking $25 to $35 million to replace all the roads over time. I mean,
I disagree, and I've been here 25 years. I think we should have some level of, when it was done last, there were some people that were very experienced with road. They knew exactly who to see, what to do, contracted it. I think you'll find it's much less, and we should utilize, as we did previously, members of our peers.
Oh, so I totally agree with you. And at this point, right? Remember, this is a plan to get there. And if we can do it cheaper, remember, smart spending is the number one goal. If we can do it cheaper, we're going to do it cheaper. I'm not just going to say, oh, we're going to go spend this and do what. No, we're going to have road experts come in and consult with us about how do we maintain the roads in the meantime to expand it. How do we do this the most economically? That is the number one objective with that.
I was amazed at what those fellas last time were able to get done with the money that was spent, and it's a pretty decent job.
Yeah, and that's great. And if we can find a better way to do it, we absolutely will do that, and we can potentially start earlier. Main point is we got to start putting money away to address it because we don't have money to do it. Yeah, Doug.
That wasn't an actual repaving, that was a chip seal.
Yeah.
That was not an actual
Right.
repaving of the park. That was lay down oil, put chip seal down, and that stuff sucked.
And it did it too.
Right, and that's an intermediate maintenance. That's an intermediate maintenance thing. We may need to do that in some place. Okay, I'm happy again. I'll stay as late as you guys want to talk about this. This is just a rough outline. We need that dedicated reserve study that gives us better numbers on all of the things we have. We need to engage consultants to give us better pricing and consultation with the most cost-effective way to maintain and extend our roads. So all that has to be done. Remember, it all starts with the premise of smart spending. Okay, whatever dollars the community and the board, gives to me and the team, we're going to do our best to spend it as cost-effectively and as efficiently as possible. There's a lot of thought that went into this recommendation that I'm making to find a balance between a whole bunch of stuff. And I know people will disagree. You have other opinions. There's a million ways we could do it. This, I believe, is a plan that is consistent, that will show, that will show results to the community, that will start enhancing the value here. So when the clubhouse is nicer, guess what? We can start charging a little bit more for the events that we have here. More people will come down to use the clubhouse, so more of the community will engage. So, yes, ma'am. Yes. Well, water is an entirely separate issue. It has many of the same issues, but it's under an entirely different financial statement and financial planning cycle. No, nothing to do with road paving. So, all right. So, guys, yeah.
Don't our pipes run underneath these roads?
Yes, they do. But the water company, the water company only pays for paving the roads when there is a pipe break or a repair. Other than that, they're handled. The roads and OSS project are handled and financed through YLOA right now. Okay.
So if we were going to repave the parkway,
yep.
Would we not make sure the water company has done all the work?
Yeah, actually it's YLOA that's doing the work, not the water company. And yes, there's a whole bunch of pieces. We got about 3 more miles right now of problem-identified pipes, okay, which we focused on the pipes that had the biggest problems first to prioritize them, right? Once we're done with that, and if there aren't other sections that become problem sections, then we look at it from the standpoint of what roads do we need to prioritize? And maybe we pick the roads that are worst and replace the pipes there. And there's a whole balance. And again, this is a multi-year plan for us to figure this out, and I promise we'll apply that same idea of being smart about it. Okay. So what it takes, guys, what it takes to do this, okay? We got to kind of bite the bullet, because we put it off for so long. But what it takes to do this, my proposal is that we increase reserve funding by $7.40 per lot per month. What that does is it takes our reserve funding from 175 to 375. Okay? I propose we spend 300. We plan to spend 300 a year of fixing the stuff that needs to get fixed. That still puts 75 into the reserve fund, increasing the reserve fund for emergencies and other contingencies and other things that come up, that we might discover or need to do earlier than we thought we might need to do them. I propose that we put a fund dedicated to road reserves of $3.70 per lot per month. That's $100,000 a year. I would propose in the first year we use a portion of that reserve to repaint the stripes, existing stripes on the roads. I'll talk about that as a budget piece. I propose that we increase maintenance. Okay, our maintenance is very underfunded compared to other associations. It also, if we need to extend the life of these items till we have time to repair them, we're going to have to spend more money on maintaining them. So that is just part of the trade-off. So I increased, proposing that we increase that $150,000 a year. We put another person on staff full-time, and then we have dollars to spend on fixing, I got 20 pictures of stuff we need to fix outside the clubhouse. I mean, paint the bridge, fix the signs that are tilted over. I mean, you name it. There's a plenty of stuff that we can fix. It's inexpensive, that really spruces up things. Budget for inflation and minimum wage change. All right. It's unfortunate that this hits at this time, but you guys may know we're in the middle of a 50% increase in minimum wage over 5 years. Okay? Wages represent roughly 50% of our entire operating budget. And every year, last year, this year, and the next 3 years, wages are going up. Minimum wage goes up $1 an hour. Okay? That puts extra inflationary pressure on our entire wage base, because other wages in other locations go up, and it makes it harder to hold on to employees. Okay? But that's unusual. That's really, we expect to see that for the next 3 years. That's a total of $21.93 per lot per month. Okay? Which I know is a big jump, but let's put it in perspective. I mean, it's 2 bottles of wine, right? I mean, it's it's 4 times going to Starbucks, right? It's 3 packs of cigarettes, or 2 depending on if you smoke and what you smoke. It's 2 for $20 pizzas that Dave's going to have here one night. I mean, it is a jump. I get it. It's a jump. But in perspective, compared to what we're going to do with that, I think it's a bargain, because we've been talking about this for years. Let's get started. Let's get something done. Let's get a good reserve study and make a detailed long-term plan with a multi-year budget. Okay? All right, I'm almost done, guys, wrapping up. So a couple notes on this. We got to expect our future budgets to keep price with inflation. All right, that $2 example I gave you, $2 a month. I mean, it's going to be a little more than $2 a month now, because it's not 20 years ago, right? But it's not going to be a lot. So you should expect, I think, 5% for 3 years due to minimum wage increase, then estimate about 3% for cost of inflation. That keeps us on track with what we need to do so we don't get behind again. Okay? Road reserves will build up and combine with the OSS trencher paving budget to fund road replacement in year 6, along with the funding from the general reserve, that $300,000 I'm proposing we do for each year on that. We could accelerate road paving, right, with future increases, but the plan assumes not doing that. Okay? This is what I'm proposing right now is the only significant increase other than keeping up with cost of living. It solves our problem, helps us solve our problem, takes a while, but it gets us there. So new reserve study could impact our priorities and our timing, right? When we go get a full discovery of all the items and all the cost to replace and all the remaining life expectancy that's physically inspected, it may adjust the priorities, right? So, trust me that we're going to be smart about it, but I don't have that information yet, so just to let you know that. And then general reserves will increase by $75,000 per year, depending on whether there are emergencies or special projects that we choose to fund. And guys, when we do this, still keeps our dues well below similar HOAs. Okay? It's still 25% less than the closest, per lot, per year, than the closest other HOA. Because we're going to be efficient, like we are in operating our amenities. Go back and look at the presentation from last month, and you'll see how much less we spend operating each of our amenities. We can be efficient. We're very good at we want to be efficient, we just don't want to be cheap. Okay, yes, ma'am.
Has this already been sealed, signed, sealed, and delivered, or?
Nope. No, this is the first time this is being presented. The board has not seen this presentation before. This is presented to the community for a discussion. It's a recommendation that I am making based on having spent lots and lots of times analyzing it and trying to come up with a plan to get us going.
So what's the process? This is new to me.
Yeah, so the process next is we will have an actual budget town hall meeting on the last Tuesday of March. There is a budget meeting that is run by Becky, who's president of the board. Okay, that meeting is on that Saturday, the 30th. Becky, what time does that start? At 10 a.m. on Saturday the 30th. Okay, and that's where the board will go through the particular budget with whoever in the community wants to attend. And come. March the 30th. Yeah. And come. Please come. I mean, the board wants feedback. You know? Yes, sir.
The good news is we're such a large association. So with a $22 increase with as many people as we have, we're fun. If we were small, as let's say one of the comparable ones, we'd be looking at $40 or $50.
Yeah.
So because there's so many paying in, it's not going to be that painful. So it's to just leave you with something that's good news. It's good that there's a lot because it spreads it out.
Right. Well, and I think, guys, I mean, look at the plan. We will accomplish a lot of stuff. We'll accomplish a lot of stuff, and we'll make progress, and we'll get moving down the road.
Bottom line is our property values will increase because we have a better environment.
Yeah.
A better maintained physical plant.
So, yeah, Ken's comment is the property values increase when we maintain the association better. Last comment I'm gonna make. Actually, no promises, but last one I think I'm gonna make is I met a gentleman the other night who was from Monterey. He was a retired vet turned sea captain, and he made his living, going out to sea and taking people fishing. He owns a home in Monterey. And we were talking a little bit, he asked me what I did, and I talked to him about what he was doing. He owns a home in Monterey. It's a condominium. He pays $417 a month in HOA fees. They have no gate. They have no swimming pool. They have no clubhouse. They have no golf course facilities. They have no restaurant facilities. Okay? They maintain common grounds. They replace the roof, and the biggest difference is it's small, right? They've got 37 homes. So no, just the issue. Yeah, just the issue that there is a good deal here for what we get for what we pay. Yes, sir.
Plans not going to be switched around, that whether they're going to stay on plan, how are you going to be sending that out monthly? How do we know that we all go in, that we're not going to end up right back when we started? I've only been here 4 years.
Sure.
So instead of talking about the past,
Sure.
we're going to look forward. How do we protect this plan, not the budget plan?
Sure. No, I totally understand. And okay, so the question is, how do we ensure that if the board approves this, that we actually follow the plan and make progress on doing what we said we were going to do, instead of doing it and then not getting things done.
Show results.
Right? So I understand where you're coming from, and I would hope that so far in the 8 months that I've been here, that you have seen some pretty significant changes in how we present and approach our financial planning. Right? Okay. And I hope that then gives you confidence, okay, which I know still needs to be further earned, but I hope it gives you confidence that, that as general manager, because I'm going to be responsible for implementing this, accountable to the board, that we can follow through on this. I think there are other things that can be put in place, including monthly reports at the board meeting on statuses, posting things. I mean, we want to be transparent with what's happening. So.
Well, and I started to talk with the gentleman here that after the second time I'm meeting you, I don't have a lack of confidence in you or what you're saying or your background. You're the second general manager, and I've been here 4 years. That's where my question is.
So hey, here, board. There's a good idea. No, I was thinking long-term contract, David, but no. Yeah, no. There are ways, there are ways to solve that, and if that ends up being a widespread, once we have the plan in place, honestly, one of the hardest things to do is create a plan that does all of these things. And once we line it up, they're executable in small chunks. Okay, so I think once we have the plan in place and the mechanisms in place and the reporting and all of that, I think even. Not that I'm not planning to. I shouldn't say this. I am planning to go somewhere. No, I'm not planning to go anywhere. I love it here. Right, I know. Yeah, so I love it here, but I think once we create the culture of how do we execute on these things, the kinds of reports we have in place, the kinds of business processes we have in place, also which I'll be working on. It's going to take 2 or 3 years to get all of that cleaned up. But once those things are in place, then things start to run a little more on momentum, and you start getting, you start just repeating the positive patterns. Yes, ma'am.
I think part of the issue as far as confidence that I see, having been here for about 5 years now, is we get things that are budgeted for a specific year, and then they don't happen. And there's no discussion about why it didn't happen. And so I agree that transparency and good communication, and I want to applaud you on these town halls.
Oh, thank you.
I think this really does help everybody understand what's going on. And it's easy to swallow an increase in fees when you understand what it's going to go to.
Yeah. Well, that's important to me. Oh, thank you. It is important to, that was one of the reasons that we prioritize doing the street signs. Okay? It's a safety issue. But we want things that the community sees that are being done. And we start small. We take some small steps forward, and then we'll start taking bigger and bigger steps. But it should be, it'll be readily apparent whether I'm successful at making this happen or not. You guys will know, and if I don't, you should kick my butt out of here. So, seriously, David.
On things in the past, I've been here for about 4.5 years. I've been on the board for 1.5 years. I've been with committees for about 4 years. One of our difficulties is we say we're going to do something, but you got to understand, Jen, if we were on day one of the budget, you don't have all that money. It gets paid over the year. So there's been times that the money has not accumulated. There's been other emergencies, things have gone on. There's the example of right now, we are delayed doing the roofs on the stable stalls because the first proposal was, again, let's put a bandage on. And everybody now agrees we don't want to do any more bandages, or unless we have to. So we delayed it because we're going to do it right. So if you're seeing a little bit of that going on right now, yes, but it's going to get better with this plan. In the past, going back my 5 years, the things I was told about, it was perfect, but the things I was told about is over the year, enough other things came up that we never accumulated enough to do the project. We said you were ready to do.
I understand. I've been involved enough to know what's going on.
We're trying to stop
And
it.
yeah, I want to just tail on that for a second. There are updates about all of those CapEx approved projects that are presented at the board meeting. You show what we spent and not spent, and there's an opportunity to ask questions about any of them, but it's all on the financial report that I provide. Secondarily, that same issue David was talking about is when we fund stuff out of the operating budget, I don't have those funds yet, right? Because those funds come in over the course of the year. That's why I asked the board in October to approve funding some of these items that were appropriate to fund out of reserves, because then we had the cash to spend it, and then we replace it throughout the year. So if for some reason we didn't get all our cash, we still got our project done, we were just a little short in what we can do next year. So we're still delivering on what we promised. Difference is, in this case, we've got $500,000. Okay, we've got $400,000 to last year, and we have we'll have about $500,000 this year in the reserve fund. We have the money to fund this plan starting now. In fact, if the board does approve this budget and the community, is on board with that, and the board approves it, I would actually ask the board to authorize implementing some of those measures right away. There's no reason to wait. We have the money. But we need to keep doing it, we need to keep getting the money. But that's the big difference than where we have been when we fund things out of operating. We don't know if we're going to have the money till the end of the year. And then we get busy and we don't get there and something else happened and some other anticipated expense. I'm not even saying that's a bad call. It probably was a good call. You know, but with the way this is designed, doesn't work that way. This is reserves. They're dedicated to reserves. The money come out of reserves. They only get spent on the projects that are approved out of the reserve things. They do not come out of the operating budget. That's a big reason why you do reserve funding instead of operational funding.
So if this increase goes through, how soon will people start to see the changes that need to get done? There's some people here that might not even be here in 10 years, you know?
Right? So I would, all of the things that I put on this list that I presented today, I would expect to be completed within the next fiscal year. 100%. I would expect to. That's why I said I would ask the board to approve if this happens, or a portion of it happens. And I don't know, guys. I just make recommendations and analyze the numbers and put the plans together. I'm going to blame this one on the board either way. No, not really. Not really, but it really is the board's decision. It's not my decision. Okay? I'm coming forward with a recommendation based on my background and experience and the analysis I've done with a plan that I think will help move us forward. The board can say yay, nay, change it, don't change it, whatever. That really is their call. So, yeah, Becky.
And one thing, we need to hear from you, but not on Facebook. Facebook doesn't get to it. I don't get on a lot of Facebook pages because it's so negative. We have a wonderful website from YLOA. Leave a message. Say this is what I'm interested in. One of my pet peeves, and Jonathan knows this, the striping on the roads. That we left one night and we couldn't see it. It was raining as far as the roads. That's been one of my pushes that I would like to have us paint if we can get enough money. You know, and that's all that.
We have a machine that does that.
Yeah, but right, it's broken. Right.
Painting cost about $18,000.
The paint itself does. Right. Yes, it does.
What we need to know is what you want, but not on some flunky Facebook. We need you to contact
All right.
our webpage.
So Becky, how about so Becky, I'm going to propose that we put some surveys up on the website, okay, to provide a place to provide feedback on these kinds of things. Okay. Yeah, you can do suggestions already. So. Sure. We're happy to take those too. Marie?
Yes, I have a couple comments. The other thing is we have a wonderful communications director who puts out a newsletter every Friday. It gives you updates on what's going on. That's William over here. If you haven't signed up to get those, you need to sign up. It's every Friday. You get YLP Live. They've also started putting a newsletter in the water bill, so everybody gets a little synopsis of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Excellent.
Yeah, and the website, the website transition is now complete from our old hosting site to our new hosting site. You'll find it is much faster now that we've finished that transition. Okay, we'll be able to continue to make new enhancements, but we have blogs posted on there about, Bridget posts blogs about what's going on at Equestrian Center. Ken Souza posts blogs, occasionally about what's going on at golf. We have access to all of the meeting agendas that happen for the committees. They can be posted and accessible online, as well as the video of the board meeting and the manager's report. It's available to you.
The other thing is the budget. Everybody gets a copy of the budget. Around sometime in May. Okay?
Yeah, the approved budget.
The approved budget. So if you can't come to the budget meeting, at least you get to see what they actually approved.
Yep. Yes, sir.
So the last meeting you had mentioned that the average age of YLP is 50 years old.
Yep.
Now I'm looking around the room, but I don't see any of them, and I'm 62.
Right.
No, none but your comment, and I don't Facebook, my
Yeah.
wife uses Facebook page.
Yeah.
But my criticism would be of the board and even the general manager, is you're not finding a way, because granddaughter goes to Rivergold, which is packed full of kids, and they're all from YLP. You're not getting to the vast majority of the people. If we represent the age of the people who are concerned, but 50 is the average age, you're missing the whole boat of how do you need to contact them? And obviously the way you are contacting them isn't working, or they would be here, or they would be communicating more. So your biggest challenge is you need to find a way to get more voices and more of the younger crowd in here.
Okay.
Because obviously, a weeknight when you have school kids, isn't it?
Yeah, just comment real quick on that. I appreciate the feedback. And that actually was the very first thing I implemented as general manager, was to improve our communications. So we're continuing to do that, and point well made and well taken.
So,
Yeah.
I get the While Away email every Friday.
Every Friday? Yeah.
Okay. So, going on what he said and what she said, because I was trying to think, where is she talking about and what's the new website? But maybe even if there was something as simple as like a little banner, but when you come into the clubhouse where a lot of families do come in.
That's a good idea.
And just a point of contact, so, because a lot of those families are super
They all
busy
use
with
these
all of
Yeah.
They all use these though.
So the comment was maybe put a banner or a notice, up at the beginning of the clubhouse when people come in to try to attract the younger audience. Yeah. Just as a quick follow-up, there's another work that the communications committee has in place to improve the notification to the community with banners along the parkway. Okay, so I won't comment further on that. But that's in process to continue to enhance communication. We're talking in communications committee, which Ken Sartain is the chair of, about updated signage, like digital signage, that can be updated without having Dave drive over and stick the glass on his head to change the letters, right? Right. So we are doing those. One of the things we're looking at, and some of this stuff I'm just, don't take it as promises, because it's not done and not finished. They're just ideas right now. But if we do the pool idea, one of the ways that we're looking at access is actually using cell phones as the key. Okay, as well as having fobs that are not cell phones. But for those people that are cell phone savvy and younger generation, when we get them on using their cell phone to catch into the pool, they're going to be seeing other stuff. So, yeah.
What time is the budget meeting, the last Tuesday in March?
That's a town hall like this. We'll do dinner from 5:30 to 6:30, and then from 6:30 to roughly 8, or as long as people want to listen to me. To that. Budget meeting itself, Beata's question, when's the budget meeting itself is Saturday the 30th, March 30th. It starts at 10 a.m. Okay? Yeah, the town hall meeting, okay, will be a preview. Okay, it will be a preview. Okay, and a chance to provide some feedback ahead of that. Okay? Any other comments, questions, feedback? Yeah? Okay.